Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. It's so good to be back. You know, we've been on the road here for 10 days, I think, going around the country, visiting the different parts of the Great Plains, you know, Arizona for 3 days and then up in Virginia Beach. And they've all been, I would say, the patriots, the MAGA positive crowd. And it's just such a refreshing contrast between that and what's happening as they're storming the dean's office in Columbia University. I can't tell you the contrast from a prayer line to being a hostage to the radicals on these campuses. And I live in two different worlds. And I thought, who can I talk to today who understands the perplexity of living in both the realm of what's going wrong with the chaos and what's hopeful. And sometimes you need to have people that have a balanced perspective on that, lest I go off in a Lance rant and never come out. So I want to introduce you to someone who's very important to our show right now, and that's Chris Ayotte. Chris was recommended to me by some of the leadership that I work with up in Michigan as a new phenomena in radio. And I'm always excited about that because we're looking for those new talents and crisp thinkers in the vacuum of Rush Limbaugh. And I'm always excited to get to know these people. So I want to welcome Chris. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Lance. An honor to be on your show.
Oh, this is going to be a hoot. I really love this. Now, I want to do something different, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you about this yet. We're just getting to know each other. But we got 7 swing states that we're focused on, and those states are battleground states. They're battleground states. Now, from a Christian perspective, I see them as a spiritual battleground. That's why they're kind of like floating between, different perspectives. They're authorized. They have the ability to authorize something for the country. And for that reason, I'm doing this thing called the Courage Tour with Mara Murillo. We have a lot of people that want to participate because it's grassroots, 4,000 to 5,000 or more citizens coming out, and we don't hold back. We hit every subject straight on. But we're going to Michigan, and your name came up as a Michigan specialist, and I want to talk to you about Michigan, and I want my audience to listen because I want you to think about how what he's saying applies to how you need to look at your state. Because I think there are things going on in every state that we're not connecting the dots on. I know that, for instance, in some campuses, while there's radicals in New York and in Yale, hey, there's revival and water baptism and all kinds of evangelism going on in other places. And you might miss the news because you're looking at, bad news sells. But I want to take a deep dive for a moment on Michigan because it's a big swing state. To be honest with you, Charlie Kirk told me, forget about Michigan. He was focusing on Wisconsin, and he changed his mind. I was glad I was right in one thing. And I said, no, Michigan is going to swing because I think this war with Israel and Hamas is going to play badly with the Arab community. And I think the Democrats are going to get support. And that creates a vacuum. So talk to me about Michigan and give us a forensic analysis of what you look at.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing it up that way because this is a very pivotal state. When you look at the history of Michigan, considered a blue state since 1992, for the most part, although Donald Trump won in 2016 by a narrow margin, there has been a push to really make this state blue in every aspect. And we're seeing the consequences of that culturally, economically, politically, societally, and certainly spiritually. But just want to pan out for a moment, Lance. And when you think of Michigan, what do you think of? The Great Lakes state. You think of all this fresh water that surrounds the great state of Michigan. What does water represent? It represents life. It also represents a well. And I want to talk a little bit about wells of revival that I believe are coming to college campuses right here in the great state of Michigan. But before I do, when you think about the decline that we've experienced here, Michigan right now is about 10 plus million people in population. Detroit, all right, major city, the number one city in Michigan, back in the 1950s had a population of about 1.85 million, almost pushing 2 million. Now it's down in the last census to about 685,000. Why the decline? I mean, we've seen that in industry. We've seen that in manufacturing. We've seen that economically. We've certainly seen it politically. But there is a sense that something is resurging here in the great state of Michigan. And I'm going to talk about the NFL draft that was just hosted last week. But when you think about the crown jewel of the city of Detroit, a building that is right on the Detroit River called the Renaissance Center, what does the word Renaissance mean? It means rebirth. It means renewal. How about this? You look at some definitions, it says revival. And I'm going to add resurgence. There is something happening in this city right now because I'm coming from the great motor city as I speak to you, Lance, that you can feel spiritually, economically, in terms of the music, the culture, the business, the innovation. You look at the gifts of Detroit, you think of architecture, you think of ingenuity, you think, of course, the automotive industry, you think of music, Motown, you think of culture. There is so much that this city offers that the whole world got a chance to see over the 3 days of the NFL draft last week. And to me, that's a picture of where we're going. Now,
Wow.
in terms of the blue state, I think we've got to think about this from the standpoint of Michigan pushing closer to purple and maybe even red. Now, there's different polls out there, but a CNN poll recently showed Donald Trump up by 8 points versus Joe Biden. And there is something stirring in the hearts of Michiganders, especially those independents, those Reagan Democrats, call them Trump Democrats, that are realizing, look, what I voted for is not what I'm seeing. This is not what I signed up for. And it's not just the economy where we're feeling the crunch in terms of gas prices and food prices and energy prices, but it's also illegal immigration. Now you've got President Trump who's saying that really every state feels like a border state. And that illegal immigration that we're seeing now come and infest our country is affecting just about every state. And you have Chilean street gangs that are invading homes in Oakland Township. Some of the news media tried to play this down, but people are concerned about immigration. They're concerned about the economy. How about abortion in this state, where you have Democrats that are pushing for an expansive platform that goes well beyond Roe v. Wade? Proposal 3 in the midterms in 2022 was voted for 57 to 43 in the state of Michigan. But Lance, I know that most voters in this state did not understand what was in this legislation, which expanded abortion to just about every point in the pregnancy, which took certain things out of the hands of parents to allow minors to get an abortion without parental consent, for minors to take puberty blockers, or to even have a sex change therapy without their parents knowing. And this is all done under reproductive health care or women's health care. And now that people are waking up and realizing what this is, they're saying this is not what I voted for. So there are a number of issues politically that have people stirred up. But if you ask them, are you better off today than you were 3.5, 4 years ago? Most people here will say no. And in terms of what you're spending every month, $1,000 to $2,000 more just to live at the same cost of living that you had during the Trump administration, this has concerned a lot of people.
All right, so
but it goes beyond what's happening politically.
All right, so let me ask you this. You're saying that, okay, I agree, there's an awful lot in Michigan that from Detroit historically, the Motown, the Great Lakes, et cetera. There is something about the variable of the evangelicals in Michigan. I work with some data from America First Policy Institute, and we look at the top 7 priorities in terms of segments of engagement in every state. Michigan came up like the 3rd or 2nd most significant concentration of Christians. Now, people would miss that. But the native potential of a grassroots movement of organized Christian effort is totally disproportionate in Michigan to Pennsylvania or Georgia. Not that there aren't, evangelicals and pro-life Catholics and Pentecostals everywhere, but imagine this: Michigan came up as 3rd or 2nd on the radar of all states where the people of God can make the biggest difference. I imagine they agree with you. I'm wondering to what degree you have are prevailing on communicating to people, the average voter, the low information voter, that there's a choice to be had here, and it's severe to make the wrong choice at this time. If we continue going in this direction, it's the cliff is right here, and you don't come back from this one. How do you create that sense of two things? How can the church actually capitalize on this moment and become a momentum builder for a populist movement, like we always talk about on War Room? And how do we reach the people that we're typically not reaching because we have a tendency to talk to ourselves?
Well, we need to do that through a number of different media channels, Lance, that we probably didn't have 10 or 20 years ago. But what's interesting when you talk about Michigan is there seems to be this remnant of believers, people who have been asking, people who have been seeking, people who have been praying, people who have been waiting on the Lord on a number of issues, not just affecting our state, but affecting the country. And there seems to be this awakening. And to your point, I have a great opportunity to work with a lot of trailblazers here in the great state of Michigan, like Rick Warswack, who is the chairman of the Michigan House of Prayer, Patrick Kolbach, who ran for governor in this great state, or Ralph Rebant, who's a pastor and also former gubernatorial candidate. We need to talk to the people who have been politically involved, who are involved in culture, in education, and in every aspect of how we live. Because to your point, the future of freedom is on the line right now. And people need to realize this is not business as usual. This is not just another election year where we decide red or blue. There's a lot going on here that really begins to depict good versus evil, right versus wrong. And we need to stir up
I'm going
that
to listen. I got to take a quick break. Hold on, because we're right in the middle of a big thought. I don't want to lose this, but I got to do a break. We'll be right back with part 2 with Chris Ayotte. I want to take a moment to talk about the volatile financial time that we're in. And I want you to empower yourself with knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge, the Bible says. Visit lancewallnau.com/birch and get a free information kit. Consider discussing how to shift your 401k or your retirement account into a tax-sheltered gold and silver account. Why don't you go to lancewallnau.com/birch right now and take action for a secure future. Welcome back to the Lance Wallnau Show with Chris Ayotte. Now, Chris, up in Michigan, you're doing this radio show. You just mentioned some people that you're networked with, and I'm making mental notes as you're talking that I really need to make sure I'm connecting with all those people. You also have some stuff going on with the Michigan, with the campuses, with the colleges. Can you tell our audience real quick what's happening up there? I do think that with one sports team, there's a number of people that have been baptized. I mean, are you aware of what's going on there?
I am indeed. In fact, I know well, he's a good friend of mine, the chaplain of the University of Michigan men's football team, Pastor Robbie Emery. Little shout out to Pastor Robbie and what he's been doing with Coach Harbaugh. It's kind of hard to see him go, but I understand the NFL was calling. But what we saw in this beautiful Michigan team, and by the way, I'm an alum of University of Michigan, the Wolverines go blue. I just want you to know that, the press didn't really cover what was happening spiritually on this team. And it was like a groundswell. You think about the last season, Lance, undefeated, and the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the way these guys came together and supported one another. Did you know that there were 70 baptisms on the Michigan men's football team, and that they were invited to be a part of Bible study and prayer voluntarily? These guys came themselves. Nobody forced them. Nobody pressured them, under the great leadership of Coach Harbaugh and Pastor Robbie Emery. And I believe there is something stirring on the campuses. I just had James Gall on my show week before last. James is a wonderful prophetic thought leader. And he's, just 3 steps ahead of most of us in terms of what God is doing and how he's moving. And he's talking about an awakening, and where we are seeing, for examples, I believe, the schemes and plot of the enemy with the anti-Israel protests on campuses. We're even seeing that here and feeling the effects in Michigan on our college campuses. But James gave a very interesting prophetic word, and that is that he saw a sustained move of the Holy Spirit. Student led revivals on the campuses of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, East Lansing, at Michigan State University. I mean, I'm even going to put some love out there for the Spartans, which I typically don't do. But I have two kids that are about to graduate from Michigan State University. And how about Central Michigan in Mount Pleasant? He talks about wells of revival that now are bursting forth. And there is this tempo, there is this drumbeat. Lance, you're going to experience it when you come here for the college tour. You don't have to take my word for it, but there is something in the atmosphere here in Michigan. God is turning, God is flipping, God is doing something very unique that we need all the remnant to come together in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal their land.
Well, Chris, I am so glad and jazzed to see that God has got you on the draft on this team here that he's putting together for Michigan. I really believe we came back. I went up there in September a year ago and met with, I don't know, but it was like 100 preachers and a couple of hundred other people. It was surprising because I was just going up to see if anybody still was interested in having a meeting. I went up there for years with Kim Clement, and I was surprised to see that all the ministry, the prophetic ministry that Kim had put into that region is still there. It's like Elijah's bones, waiting for somebody to land on it so it can receive that impartation. And I think there is a grassroots movement that is coming together in Michigan. And like anything else, there needs to be catalytic events. The Courage Tour with Mario Murillo and me is the event that we're using to bring together all the latent, disconnected parts of the body of Christ together to work cohesively. And then we reach out, and he does the gospel so brilliantly. I mean, we average 1,000 people a night that come forward in the altar calls. Our biggest problem, believe it or not, it's not having an impact on the harvest. It's workers, because we don't have enough laborers that can follow up on it. But I mean, we're leaving behind in Arizona 2,000 new members for the churches that participated. Ironically, I think we only had like around 7 churches. So they all just got a boatload of growth. And so the challenge is always unity. I won't be able to leave this segment without asking you. You're such a positive guy, but I got to go down this I don't know what the hole is, the rabbit hole, with your governor. I'm amazed. To me, when we had the lockdowns, Chris, there were 2 governors that stood out to me as being the most villainous and dangerous, foreboding indication of if we ever go into a situation where the government is given the tyrannical power to dictate how the citizens live. Your governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and Governor Gavin Newsom, I looked at as rising stars in the Democrat Party. It's kind of like a dream ticket to some. They could just cash out, Biden and Kamala and bring in Gavin and Gretchen. And it freaked me out because I really think that they had the worst record regarding early indicators of how they will handle religious liberty and Christians. Isn't she the governor that was going to bulldoze down a church at one point if they didn't stop meeting? I don't want to put you in this position because you are a positive voice in Michigan, but you got to tell us.
Yeah, well, we got to be real about it. And let me just say, Governor Whitmer really doesn't represent, I believe, the majority of Michiganders. I mean, you see the left pushing and pushing and pushing these issues, as we see on abortion, and you're going to see her out there talking about it for this election year because the Democrats really have nothing else to talk about. And so they're going to push this pro-abortion agenda, which we know really does not represent where the American people are, let alone the great state of Michigan. But to your point, Governor Newsom and Governor Whitmer are just examples of the extreme progressive left that are pushing issues that go alongside a deep state agenda that really does not represent the great people of the state of Michigan. So we've got to exercise our vote here. We've got to be purposeful, strategic, and intentional about what's happening, because what we're seeing in her case is, in the schools, for example, you've got pornographic books that are in student libraries that shouldn't be there. And then she wants to call out the parents for not being accepting and, embracing our kids. They don't want to talk about those things. Then you've got the gender identity indoctrination that's happening in our schools. That's another issue culturally that just doesn't fit with where the majority of voters are, let alone what's going on politically in this state. When you look at some of the China funded investments vis-a-vis green energy and the EV battery development, which you have even in the Senate, for example, 10-9 vote for a CCP funded company to come in and produce EV batteries with an incentive of $175 million. These are razor thin decisions that are being made to push a green energy or deep state initiative. And I got to be honest with you, Lance, I mean, eventually people are just going to realize this is not helping the people of Michigan, and it's not helping industries in particular. Look at the automotive industry that thought that they were going to be able to sort of change one day to the next day with EV. Consumers are saying, no, it just doesn't make any sense. This application is not something we want, even with the $7,500 incentive. So I want people to realize that just because they're out in front and they're positioning themselves at the superstars, the remnant here in Michigan needs to pray for godly leaders, people who understand virtues and traits. And I want to say this, if I may, Lance, about Kim Clement. I had the great privilege of seeing Kim give a prophetic word in Pasadena, California, when I lived out there in my corporate years at Harvest Rock Church with the great Papa Che on, Pastor Che. And Kim was talking about a lion. Think about the Detroit Lions. He was talking about a lion that was a carcass and there was honey in the carcass. He was talking about what he thought was dead, or what people thought was dead and gone, could not be revived, too far gone. There was sweetness in the carcass of the lion. I never forgot about that picture. And coming back to Detroit, it never dawned on me what specific city he was talking about. He was talking about over the nation. But I think this so resonates with where we are, because if you look at the NFL draft last week, wow, Lance, we had nearly 800,000 Americans descend on Detroit for what was a 3-day NFL draft, and record attendance, beat the last record by more than 200,000, and a cash infusion into this city of $175 million. They actually think it might be north of that.
I think
But
every
this
state
draft is a picture of what God is doing.
I'll tell you what, every state needs a Chris that is seeing the positive side of what God is doing, that is looking. I mean, I'm reading my notes. Someone said, Chris thinks that Detroit's going to be like the Rome or, well, I don't know, not Las Vegas, but something.
Paris.
Oh, the Paris.
Paris
Yes.
or Rome.
Yes, Paris.
There's a travel magazine that put Detroit up in, can you believe this, as a must-see destination behind Paris, Rome, and Fiji.
Well, you know, I think of it that way: Fiji, Paris, Rome, or Detroit when I'm looking at a place to go. Listen,
Exactly.
Chris, thanks for being with us.
Why not?
Listen, brother, Chris Ayotte, ladies and gentlemen, how can people keep in touch with you? How do they follow you?
Well, they can simply come to our website at the radio station at WMUZ.com/Chris Ayotte. I also have a wonderful entertainment website at chrisayotte.com.
Yes, you know, my son was holding up signs about having him do impersonations, and I thought, let me just let my audience get one bite at a time, and we'll do the impersonations on the next show, because I hear they're hilarious, and I want to hear it, but I don't want to. I'm so dystopian today. You've lifted me up, Chris. You've lifted my spirits, because every state needs a Chris Ayotte there to let them see what God's doing and not deny where the battles are. Well, that was a really interesting interview. And you know, every state has individuals that really have a territorial authority to influence their own region, their own state. And I pray for you that you guys that are listening, you younger ones, if you catch this broadcast, that you be open to the fact that doors open into media and into this area of influence in capricious ways, it seems. But maybe God is preparing you for that very thing, and maybe God's giving you an audience so you could use it for other purposes. And I'm going to end the show right here with this admonition. Go to thecouragetour.com. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, put courage in the comments section, because the Courage Tour is hitting a revival pace now. I mean, there's really awakening happening in Michigan and Wisconsin. Those are the next 2 days. We're figuring out what to do in Pennsylvania, but these two, bam, 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 the targets are getting clear to hit those states, and you don't want to miss the miracles, signs, and wonders that are happening, the impartation, the activation. It's the real deal. I mean, you're going to hear about it. Eventually, it's going to hit, it's going to hit a certain, everyone's going to be kind of like aware of it, because it's just brand new. It's starting. We're hitting those states, and it's awakening and reformation all at the same time. So you want to go to thecouragetour.com, put the word courage down in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.